One of the greatest gifts about working with source material is that it's familiar. It's something that obviously we wouldn't know it as source material unless it captured the public's imagination. That is one of the wonderful things. It is also the most difficult thing because you're dealing with expectation, and usually comes from a book or perhaps a film or an article. And so how do you honor the source material in a whole new medium? In the live theater, we don't rely on close-ups. We can't do chases around a corner because the proscenium is our frame and we can't cut out of that frame. We can shift it with light, set pieces, and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge as a creator of new work with source material is honoring the source material, but finding the thing that makes it theatrical. That lives in the world of emotion. That lives in the world of seeing yourself in the story, no matter what the story is. And so that's what I look for. One of the things that I've discovered about the theater is theater goers and also stories that work best in the theater. We're all looking to reflect our own experiences through those stories. And one thing we share universally is we come from family, and that family as we're growing up is our primary family. And then as we grow into adulthood and beyond, we then find ourselves choosing our family and where we feel the safest and where we feel we can contribute the most to each other. And that's the great thing about musicals. In order to sing, the stakes have to be so high and so universal. Any show you see is about you. You know, you talk to any young person who saw Wicked and can relate to characters, or Rent was a show I produced that obviously captured the imagination in the mid-90s all through, and still does today, because it's a universal story about finding your family against all odds, and the music doesn't quit. So I look for those things, and for me, The Notebook was a universal story about not only true love and building your family, but then also how do you hold on to the legacy of your family when we're all only here on this planet for so long. And that's not a sad thing. That's actually a very redemptive, remarkable thing about the show. It's a show that reminds you how powerful it is to be alive. And that is why it's called the live theater. The wonderful thing about The Notebook Live is the art form itself evaporates the moment you make it. So it's literally a story about memory when you are making these connections and telling the story in real time. It's richer than the book and the film, even though those are two masterworks. This theater piece, seeing the younger, middle, and older Allies and Noahs meet, connect, separate, come back together, and then separate not because of physical, but because of the idea of losing memory and trying to hold on to memory. And the wonderful thing about the theater is you can have parallel realities. You can't do that in film. You can do that in a book in your mind, but to literally have a transformative art form that allows you to see those connections and those misses, and the memory of youth is right at older Allie's fingertips, but yet the memory of yesterday is a million miles away. It's one of the most beautiful parts of seeing the show live. I've been fortunate to work with not only completely original material like Rent, Avenue Q, and The Heights that has no source material, and then shows like Mrs. Doubtfire, The Devil Wears Prada, and The Notebook, which relies on beloved source material. I think The Notebook was the most challenging and also the most rewarding musical I've ever been a part of based on source material, because we had to take a beloved love story with one of the classic rainstorms in all of cinematic history and actually deliver it on stage, and to make sure that we weren't doing a show where everyone had to, an older Allie and a middle Allie and a younger Allie had to look the same. Because what we feel about our love story is that the soul loves unconditionally. Our physical vessels, our bodies, are not really what our show is about. It's really about how the spirit of love conquers all. So for me, from a sense of connecting people and moving people emotionally, this has been the show that has the most heart-forward quality to it. And I love that. I think heart-forward is why we have to sing, because your heart is so big with feeling and emotion, you can't just say it anymore. You have to sing it. Finding Ingrid Michaelson, who is one of the most wonderful just humans, but also if you listen to all her songs, they're really about how do we connect. And her lyrics and her melodies are so contagious that I couldn't have found a better collaborator. I'd like to say it was my idea, but it was just my idea to meet with her to talk about it. I didn't even know we were going to talk about The Notebook. And I kind of said, I'm working on this show, maybe, the rights aren't done. And I said The Notebook, and she just said, I have to write it. There's a lot of detail, but I will just say in 24 hours, she sent me a song and said, how's this? And that song is called I Know, and it is the penultimate song in the show, almost word for word, note for note, what she sent me an hour after our first meeting. Bringing The Notebook to the Ordway is really, shows about coming home. It really feels like coming home. As a 33-year-old, even before I produced Rent, I was hired to be the CEO and president of the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts. I told them, I remember in my interview, I said, if I get this job, I'm opening this show in about 10 months off Broadway, and if it works, I might need to kind of go back and forth a bit to open it. And they said, of course. The board's like, sure, he's producing a little show, and fine. And of course, that show was Rent. I was there for 7 years, from 1995. I produced Rent on Broadway in 96, but I was there from 95 to 2002. So for those 7 years, from 33 to 40, I really learned, not only while I was producing on Broadway, I also learned very, very clearly how to make sure to run an arts center so that it could be here decades after I left. And the good news is it is. So not only did I bring in shows and present shows, I also produced shows. We were the home of and still are, the Minnesota Opera and the Chamber Orchestra and the Schubert Club that do many concerts and a lot of children's program. I was part of founding the Children's Festival, which 25 years later is still thriving in Rice Park. So it's neat to come home and say, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I want to share with you. And The Notebook is one of those offerings. The wonderful thing about the Twin Cities, it's not only just a great place to live, it has an ethic of taking care of your neighbor. There's something about taking care of your neighbor, especially in St. Paul. It's very much a neighborhood city, and the stories you can tell to your neighbors, because that's what created theater. We'd go down to the river and wash our clothes and have to figure out how to pass the time, and we made up stories. It's a great audience for the theater. They like to reflect in ideas and culture. I always felt that when you went to the theater at the Ordway, it wasn't something you just did between other things. It was truly the destination, because they built a world-class arts center in 1985. It has truly, truly been the centerpiece. And it says everything about St. Paul specifically is we are a town that believes in quality entertainment to reflect our communities with our families. So strangers, who might be our neighbors that we've never met, can gather, see a story, or hear a concert, and then leave as a family. And that's really powerful. So it really builds community, and it's a great audience. I don't think the audience has evolved that much. I just think it's always been a great audience. I will say people thought I was nuts when I said we're going to do 11 weeks of Rent here. And they had never done 11 weeks of a show at the Ordway. And I said, and we definitely sold out. So we got a lot of young people to come to the theater by having Rent there. And I think that is one of the things I'm most proud of producing Rent around globally, but also in the Twin Cities, because it's built like an opera house. It might seem formal, and it's gorgeous inside. One of the things about the Ordway that's so wonderful, it actually has the greatest amount of square footage for outside of the chamber of the theater. So you can really gather and talk to your neighbors before and have some food, have a beverage. It truly reminds you, oh, we're here to gather, not just see a show. That's always been an ethic at the Ordway. So it's hard to say it's evolved when you've already started with one of the best destinations America has to offer. What I hope the audiences that come to the Notebook, whether it's at the Ordway or elsewhere, is that people have a hard time with this idea, but we're only here for so long. So what are you going to do with that time? And I have found it's easier to love and reach out with curiosity if you don't understand someone, rather than decide they aren't someone who should be in your life. This show is about making sure you live your life by connecting with your family and finding people who help you grow, even if it's frightening, because when you meet strangers and they become your friends, you've learned something about yourself. And that generosity of spirit is what I hope people take away from the show, because we don't really have time to be angry and create divisiveness. we only have time to make sure that we're contributing while we're here. So I hope we all get frustrated, we all have people who annoy us, but I hope people live the world a little kinder and more generous to each other after they see The Notebook. Producing this show has made me much more grateful for the time I have. I'm a 63-year-old person right now, and producing The Notebook gave me a lot of energy, because that need to connect when you're trying to bring someone's memory back of look at what we had, and sharing a life when maybe one of the couple is drifting because of dementia or Alzheimer's, and those moments of trying to capture that connection back. It helped me realize don't take anything for granted. Even when I'm frustrated, it's a gift to actually be of sound mind to be frustrated and understand why I'm frustrated, as opposed to being frustrated having no idea quite where I am. It just made me hug my kids more, tell the people in my life, my wife and others, how much I love them, and it just was really good, a booster rocket internally in my own self to make sure that I am using my time and sharing my gratitude as best I can in the short time I am here.